thank you very much for registering, and thank you very much for attending the call. Today, we're going to look at the next webinar on the roadmap to net zero. So a bit of housekeeping to start with. Put your microphone and your camera off to save some of that broadband. The session will be recorded, so you'll be able to go back to the microsite where you'll find both the videos and the set of slides. So don't worry too much about it, or you don't need to take notes and that sort of things. So what's your agenda today? So the agenda today is we'll be joined, and I'm pleased to say that we'll be joined by Gary Morton, who's a business improvement manager at RWG, and Graeme Gillespie, who is the operation integrity manager also at RWG. And they're going to present to us their journey so far to net zero and what they've learned on the way. They'll be talking about an introduction to their business, which is about testing engines, especially for Siemens and Rolls-Royce. Their emissions and the reductions and who they are looking at, and the decarbonization project. So at the end of that, we'll be opening the floor and take question and answer for, pardon me, Gary and Graeme. And then we'll look at the Scottish engineering part, and today we'll focus on net zero and energy cost. And why do you do net zero now, and what's the story about the cost, and how can net zero help, killing two birds with one stone? So that's the agenda for today. At the end of the Scottish engineering session, we'll open the floor again for further questions if you have any. So I'll pass on to Gary and Graeme. If you want to share your screen.
Okay, morning Eric, morning everyone. Hopefully you can see that screen now. So this is the presentation from RWG on our decarbonisation strategy, what we've done to achieve that. So just before I start, we'll just who we are and what we do. So joining me today is Gary Morton. He's our business improvement manager. He's our Lean Sigma black belt. And obviously myself, I'm the operations integrity manager, so I'm responsible for the QHSE team here at our main operating facilities in Aberdeen. What do we do? We are a gas turbine repair and overhaul facility. We're a joint venture between Wood and Siemens Energy, so our shareholders are major stakeholders in lots of different businesses, and certainly have a lot of focus on decarbonisation. What do we do then? We work on aero-derivative gas turbines, predominantly SGT A35s, SGT A20s, and SGT 05s. For anybody who's got any experience with gas turbines, these are all ex-Rolls-Royce Energy RB211s, Avons, and 501 engines. So the SGT A35 is very similar to what you would have on a 747, 757 aircraft. We also do Rolls-Royce marine spays and tines for navies across the world. Our main goal, obviously, is helping our operators in the global power generation, oil and gas and marine propulsion industries to maximise their gas turbines, to ensure that they're available at all times and they've got low cost of ownership of their equipment. So we take the engines in for overhaul, we strip them, we take all the components and repair them in our advanced remanufacturing business. So as you can imagine, we are a very naturally a carbon-heavy activity. We have engine testing facilities, we have heat treatment, we have furnaces, chemicals clean lines. So we've got a lot of processes that are very carbon heavy. So obviously with our shareholders, we're aligned to their strategy. We are supported by RWG board and the boards of both shareholders, and we are committed to combating the climate change. The strategy that we have is aligned with both shareholders' strategies. We have a lot of input from Wood and a lot of input from Siemens Energy, a lot of assistance from both those groups. Our group of members or team members that we've got here in Aberdeen are enthusiastic about ensuring that we do meet the targets that we are setting. We are aligning our targets with the science-based target in accordance with the Paris Agreement. So we are looking to holding, our reducing our carbon footprint to by 2% by 2035. So you can see on here, we're structuring it around three main themes. So decarbonising our services and solutions to our customers, climate neutral our own operations, and decarbonising our supply chains. So 3 acres of focus really that we set out there is measuring our own and setting our own targets for our Scope 1, Scope 2 and Scope 3 emissions. Awareness and training and giving a net zero mindset to within the organisation. Previously, decarbonisation was always something that was in our mind. Some of our customers required that we reported on our emissions. And when you look back to 2015, we had 1 or 2 people that were involved in decarbonisation, and now as a business, it's really embedded now. It's seen. The health, safety and environment, the HSE, it was always a large H and a large H and a small E, and now that E is coming into focus. It's talked about at all board meetings. And what we've looked at over the years and our legal requirements is we've obviously had to implement energy efficient solutions to buildings and processes as part of legislation. So ESOS, so energy saving opportunity schemes. We're also maximising use of green energy. We're compliant with the relevant regulations, and we're making use of the expertise that our 2 shareholders have and the journeys that they're already making to net zero. And we provide support to the shareholders in their respective projects as well, and we'll cover that a little bit later on in our slides, how we're assisting our main shareholder Siemens with some of their projects. We have got a dedicated governance structure in place to support the implementation of our actions, and we've got a roadmap which I'll show you on the next slide. So if I move to the next slide, we can discuss our roadmap in a little bit more detail there. So the first thing we did was really establish a steering committee and a decarbonisation focus group. So the steering committee is a group formed of the managing director, finance director, and various other directors within the business, and some key managers. That steering committee then has a decarbonisation focus team under that. We have volunteers from around the company, but also including our facilities supervisor, maintenance supervisor, business improvements manager, Gary. Once we had formed that focus group, our first next step really was to actually get some help. We joined the Scottish Engineering Webinars, and we also engaged in a third party. And that third party input came and audited us as a business to see where we were, what we could do, and what they could do to assist us. They gave us advice on aligning with the science-based targets, They put processes in place to measure our emissions. They gave us assistance with that. And the initial plans were implemented to reduce emissions of our own operations. We were already looking at 100% electricity, both in the UK and the US, green energy electricity, and purchasing that as part of our contract with our supplier. And we were starting to look at UK efficiency projects and going on. So that was 2021. To ensure that we complied with legislation, we comply with ESOS, SECA. We're also a member of the UK United Kingdom Emissions Trading Scheme. We're classed as a small emitter. Obviously, with our engine testing, the combustion fuels where the combustion is rated with a thermal input of more than 20 megawatts, and we fall under the small emitter scheme rather than the ultra small, because we're over 2,500 tons of CO2 for that one. As we moved into 2022, we started to finalise our roadmap. We produced and issued our decarbonisation and environmental policy, given our global targets for our business. As not only are we looking for the Aberdeen site, but we also have a site in Houston and a joint venture in Kuala Lumpur. We started a Greenbelt project run by Gary on engine testing efficiency, and we've got a couple of slides that we've got later on to Gary to go through that. Our steering group and our governance groups looked at the net zero, embedding it in everything that we do and what we look at. And we started to get in partnership with our Siemens, who is not only the OEM for our product, but also our co-owner, and looking at alternate fuel testing for the engines and looking to move away from hydrocarbons onto sustainable fuels, predominantly ethanol and methanol, and eventually onto hydrogen. And to also develop and implement sustainable procurement practices and starting to measure our scope 3. So when you look at our emissions, I'll show you in a minute, we only touched the surface of our scope 3 emissions, and that's somewhere where we've really learnt a lot this year about how and where to look for your scope 3 emissions. And as we move into 2023 and onwards, you'll see that our scope 3 emission reduction and partnership with Siemens strategy projects on new technologies is probably going to be key to how we achieve decarbonisation. If we have a look at this slide here, you can see this is our base year of 2020. 7,934 tonnes of CO2, but predominantly 70% of that accounts for both gas and liquid testing of our products that once we've done the overhaul, and the remaining 30% is for power, heat and processes within the facility. And by following ESOS phase 1 and phase 2, we've already reduced them by 10%. So therefore, unless we can come up with some solutions for testing options, it's going to be very difficult for us to reduce our footprint further. Our operations and financials director will say to you they want more engines through the door. So more engines through the door means more engine testing, means our carbon, our CO2 footprint for both liquid and gas testing would increase. So we've had to look at options of reducing that. And Gary has run a fantastic efficiency programme on that this year, which he'll explain in a little while. Completed decarbonisation processes so far across all UK sites. We are now 100% electricity purchased from renewable resources. We do biannual recommissioning of heating controls. That was something that we found that one of the ESOS phase 1 or phase 2 had brought up. We've got facilities both sides of Aberdeen Airport, some very large workshops and a lot of offices, and all areas had timers set to different times. Some had the heating coming on 5 o'clock in the morning, going on to 4 o'clock at night. Some had coming on at 8:30 to 9 at night. So what we do now, we go around and every 6 months we check the heating controls and make sure that they're set to a certain standard, and we ensure the timings are on fully. Workshop upgrades we upgraded to LED lighting. We fitted destratification fans. So as you know, hot air rises, we've got some high workshops and the fans just blow that hot air down. So that keeps the workshop warmer and reduces the cost for heating. We have some very big roller doors. So we're installation of air curtains. We have a lot of LED systems. So local exhaust ventilation systems for our processes. So we've fitted variable speed drives, so they're not running at full speed at all times. They'll only kick up into full speed when there's an operator there. We also noted that we've got a lot of compressed air lines. We had a lot of air leaks, and obviously that was compressing air that we didn't need to use or wasn't being used. So we've found savings there as well. We've installed gas automatic meter readings and conservation of chemical tank heating as well. Offices, ongoing LED update lighting and upgrade of air conditioning systems and test bed efficiencies, which Gary will go on to in a moment. But already we've saved across the workshops and the sites 233 tonnes saved annually through the implementation of these efficiencies, and that's by using our third-party assistance as well. So that equates to approximately 10% of total emissions from heating, lighting and power. And as I mentioned earlier on, we have a lot of high consumption equipment, furnaces and ovens, etc. in our advanced remanufacturing business. Okay, move on to the next one, and I'll just hand you over to Gary. Gary is going to talk about engine testing efficiencies and what, as a company, we looked at. As you remember from our previous slide on our emissions, 70% of our emissions are through engine testing.
Okay, thanks, Graeme. Good morning, everyone. Yes, so as Graeme had just kind of talked us through there, the CO2 emissions as a byproduct from post-overhaul engine testing is by far our most significant emissions producing activity. At the moment, really, not testing the engine post-overhauls are non-negotiable with our customers. So what is it that we could do to help and assist with that? Well, initially, we kicked off, we formed off a small dedicated dynamic team, and we simply challenged the norm under the mantra of nothing that we do should escape challenge, and even small improvements is an improvement. And applying the principles of Lean and Six Sigma, we reviewed our own processes and procedures, and also that of the OEM's testing schedule, which is how we're kind of bound to test the engines to be compliant. So we asked the favourite questions that we have, the hows, the whys and the what ifs. And what we did was we mapped out all of the reviewed ideas and suggestions, by way of a payoff matrix. We run the data, we gathered the evidence and presented this to the OEM, supporting our proposed changes to the test schedule. Being an approved OEM maintenance and overhaul facility, like I said just earlier there, we're bound to test the engines in line with a prescribed method, which is controlled, delivered and owned by the OEM. So any deviation from that, we would need to seek approval from. So that's effectively what we did here. We challenged the norm. We asked the silly questions, if you want to call them that, and we put some proposals in place. Okay, Graeme? So as I said there, we challenged the OEM's testing schedule and improved the efficiency of the process itself of testing the engine in 8 key areas associated predominantly with the sequencing of the running operations and rationalisation of data capture and dwell points. So all to do with the actual running of the engine itself. No real science in the less that you run, the less emissions you produce. So that's exactly what we did. you know, what can we do to make the engine testing the most efficient that it could be, running it at less time as possible, consuming as less fuel as possible, but still meeting the requirement or the end game of the test schedule itself. So yeah, we're happy to find that all of our proposals were actually approved by the OEM, and they're in the midst of changing their testing schedule at the moment based on our improvement suggestions. So what did that mean for us? Well, a measure there, the bottom left-hand corner graph that we see there, so that's the engine types that we'll have, the A20, A35, A35 on gas, and the DLE, which is a dry low emissions engine, which we test on gas as well. And the blue bar shows their 2021 average fuel consumption per test, and the orange bar shows our 2022 average fuel consumption per test to date. So with those employed improvements, we're seeing a significant reduction in the time on test, the fuel used on test, and as a subsequent, the emissions that we're producing. So as a whole to date so far, based on the changes that we've put in place, we estimate that we've reduced our CO2 emissions associated directly with engine testing by about 700 tonnes. Okay, Graeme? That's another over there, yeah. So and the benefit of that as well, Graeme had also mentioned earlier that we have another overhaul facility in Houston who test the 501 engine. We've been on this journey, and we've been taking the team across there along on the journey with us. We've had a number of conversations with them. We've shared with them our approach, our findings, and our suggestions, and they're beginning to make the same developments over there with their testing processes in Houston. But also, in effect, by sharing the proposed or more efficient testing procedure with the OEM, and them changing that within their hardware documentation, anyone testing an engine now in line with the OEM test schedule should be delivering the same benefits. Okay, that's me, Graeme. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, as Gary said, we looking at our emissions for 2020 was 7,933, and for 2021 was 7,576. So, you know, there was a couple of hundred reduction. Hopefully, when we get to the end of this year and we have the figures, we'll see a significant drop, predominantly through this engine testing efficiency program that Gary's introducing. As Gary mentioned there, it will be available to other OEM approved overhaul facilities once the OEM has updated the test schedule themselves, that will be issued to all operators. We also have key decarbonisation projects underway as part of our decarbonisation policy. Our steering committee and focus group meet quarterly each, and we have projects in place. So really, the key projects that we're looking at now is the alternative fuel testing. So that's the road to hydrogen. We are working in with Siemens Energy, the OEM, on that one. We're due to use our facility in Aberdeen to test one of their A20 engines on an alternative fuel in the new year. We're also involved with the OEM to support new DLE technology, so it's dry low emission engines. The A35 currently has a DLE option, whereas the A20 isn't. The A20 is an older engine. However, the OEM is committed to looking at DLE technologies for that legacy product, and that then brings in cleaner engines for operators. Another one that we were looking at is measuring the carbon footprint of engines through the overhaul process. One thing I mentioned earlier on, that our operations and financials director would say we want more engines through the facility. So we were trying to gauge what is the carbon footprint per engine type. So, you know, what is the carbon footprint from a A35 as it arrives in Aberdeen until it leaves Aberdeen. So Gary's been working on that one, pulling the data together with the departments. We're also looking at our Scope 3 emissions now. So we identified top 10 suppliers. The way we did that was we looked at top 10 suppliers on cost to us, and then we've approached them for understand and measure their emissions for us. We've had some variable response so far, but it's something that we now are asked from our customers. For example, Shell. I'm now commit to updating our data on a Shell portal. We've been out to Total Energy to do a similar presentation to them to explain where we are in our decarbonisation. So our customers, although are fossil fuel heavy, are certainly looking at decarbonisation as well. We've installed electric charging points across our Aberdeen facility, and we have now got three electric vans and an electric vehicle on order, pool cars. Which taken us a little bit longer due to the delay in delivery of the vehicles, but we now have those in place. And one of the programs was to look at the cost of running our fleet in Aberdeen. It's not a huge fleet, but it's still a savings that we are making. We're also looking at the possibility of using sustainable aviation fuel in our testbed in Aberdeen, which is obviously liquid at the moment. It uses Jet A1, so aviation fuel. That is coming on now. I notice some of the operators, some of the larger airlines are starting to do flights where they have sustainable aviation fuel in at all times. There is a cost to that. However, that's something that we may need to speak to our customers about. A lot of them are on their journey now to decarbonisation and net zero, so they will look to reduce their Scope 3 emissions, which is our Scope 1 and 2s. I suppose the challenges for us then is a challenge for Indra is to join efforts around a common cause. We are carbon heavy. We are totally reliant on engine testing, and we can't get away from that. Adoption of common net zero certification is something that we're looking at now. I know I spoke to Eric about it before. Is it ISO standard, or do we look at PAS 2060? And that would just really avoid duplication of effort, drive down consistency, and promote a journey to decarbonisation across our group. So here in Aberdeen and Kuala Lumpur and Houston. So these are the projects that are underway. We've got our final quarterly call in December, really just to reset and see where we are following this year's programme. But it's been a journey that we've taken together as a group. We do lead a lot of information to our joint venture in Kuala Lumpur and our company out in Houston. So that really takes us on to MD's got any questions. I saw one just pop up there a minute ago to see if I can see where it was.
Sure, there's one in chat here from Ian McLachlan. Ian, do you want to come off mute and ask it yourself? If not, I can.
No,
Yeah,
no
okay?
problem. No problem. Thanks for taking us through your slides here. They were very interesting. I'm just wondering if you're considering renewable energy, or maybe rooftop solar or a wind solution to assist with any of your facilities.
We can't with a wind solution. We're right next to Aberdeen Airport, so I don't think they'd be too keen to us put in a big 50-foot turbine. But I know Siemens Energy, or one of our shareholders, they have a wind turbine at their Siemens facility, so that they have looked at that. We certainly have got a lot of flat roofs, so that's something that we could consider for electrical power, would be to put on solar panels. It's something that has been discussed.
Yeah.
There's another one about considering electrifying the warehouse heating. That has also been mentioned. We do all our space heating is gas at the moment, so it would either be electrifying that, or the other option is obviously purchasing green gas, which is difficult to get at the moment.
Any other questions for?
Yeah, there's one from Sheena there.
Right.
I personally, I don't see there being an issue. You know, these engines are very similar to aviation, well, they are aero-derivative engines. So, you know, the gas turbines and aerospace now, some of the airlines are using sustainable aviation fuel in their aircraft and flying them. So I think what the issue would be, or the problems that we would see, is actual supply is sustainable. And for us, it's probably an option in Aberdeen. We could get sustainable aviation fuel delivered to our facility here, but it would be more our customers. You know, a lot of these customers are remote sites, or think of the Alaskan pipelines in North America, and obviously offshore. So it'd be getting there, the sustainable fuels to them. Yeah, Jane's got a message there. Yes, we have managed to measure the reductions through the ESOS that we put in. So the stratification fans, the air curtains, etc. We've seen a reduction in, I think it was, it's about 300. I'll just have a quick look for you. Yeah, 233 tonnes saved annually through the efficiencies that we've done so far, from LED lighting, air curtains, destratification fans, etc.
Okay, I see.
Looks like there's a question coming.
There's one more comment. Yeah, there's one more comment from Ian.
Ian, if it's easier, just come off mute and ask it. If you don't, if it's easier than typing. So Ian's asking if you're seeing improvements.
We are seeing small improvements, obviously, in the reduction, significantly when we brought in the LED lighting. LED lighting changed a lot, and some of our smaller workshops, we also had the LED lighting that is triggered by motion sensors as well, so the lights are not on so much. Where we did see quite a drop in energy bills was during COVID, when the offices weren't manned. So we did see that. How about staff engagement? We do present decarbonisation and environmental topics at our health and safety committee meetings. So there is engagement at that level. That's then filtered down to departmental health and safety committee meetings. So there is good engagement. We do have what we call health, safety, environmental opportunity scheme, where people can put in improvement ideas, and we would action them. So yeah, we have got good engagement. We are seeing that now. We are seeing ideas coming through from staff.
Yeah, and quite fortunately, Graeme, just recently we run a safety climate survey across the whole company, and within there was some questions with regards to environmental aspects of how we as RWG function as a company, and what we could do to improve. And the suggestions that we got back were fantastic. You know, so the workforce is absolutely engaged as we bring them along on this journey with us. Like Graeme says, there's a massive focus on HS&E. The E's grown from a small E to a larger E now. And the workforce are fully on board, and we get some fantastic engagement with them and suggestions. So it's great. It's really good.
Yeah, we've just, as I say, we've got electric vehicles now. The electric charging points are open for employees to use as well. However, they have to use a payment scheme for that. We've actually recently started to purchase sustainable clothing. So it's not all about we're looking at all aspects, not just the saving of power. So sustainable across all aspects of the business.
Okay. Thanks for that.
Okay, I'll stop sharing.
Gary, Graeme. So let me share. So I hope you should be seeing my screen now. So thanks very much to Gary and Graeme. I think it's all very relevant. It's all very pleasing because there's been a lot of really good progress made, and I think there is plenty of learning in there and things we can relate to. Today, what I'm going to talk about is net zero and energy costs, because that's what the actuality is about, and that's what I think would be of interest. And the question is, why net zero now? So we've just been through a series of challenges. You know, we've had COVID, we had Brexit, and then that triggered some supply chain challenges, you know, either overseas or even in the UK. And now we've got energy costs going through the roof, and we've got the challenge of the cost of living. And then you're thinking, it's just like in all these, you know, net zero, who cares? And then that's where you find that everybody cares. Consumer cares, and they want to see net zero coming to fruition. The customer cares, and that's what Gary alluded to when his customers are caring about net zero. Employee cares, and that's what, again, Gary and Jane mentioned today, is about how do you engage your employees. The competitor cares because they see it as an opportunity, and it's what's called FOMO, the fear of missing out. Your peers cares because you have a lot of pledges being done, and that's again a point that Gary touched upon with Siemens and big companies, especially today, will commit to some science-based target and some net zero ambitions. And last but not least, government cares. And again, that's a point that Gary alluded to with ESOs and ECR, the Streamlined Energy Carbon Reporting. And it's already in place for large company or large emitters. So you can see that everybody cares. So that's why net zero. So if you look at the consumer, then they care and they believe that they will require the private sector to help. And net zero comes second after the NHS on the priority for the consumer. So they do care, and they care to the extent that they are prepared to pay more or to get less availability. So they are prepared to go through the pain of becoming net zero. So consumer cares, and because consumer cares, customer cares. And if you take the example of large company, multinational companies, then they reckon that by 2025, 78% of them will have started to remove the slow to transition suppliers. So that's one of the ambitions, or one of the things we see coming through for the large companies. And by 2050, that would have become 96%, which would have planned to reach net zero. And net zero include scope 3, to Gary's point, and scope 3 include upstream, and their upstream is your downstream. So that's where there is an impact, and that's where the ambition is. Now, they are prepared to help suppliers. So suppliers that do help and do have a carbon reduction plan will likely to be seen as a preferred supplier, and therefore will become in a list of preferred supplier status. So more likely to get businesses. So customer cares, and employee cares. Employees, like a quarter of them, 35% roughly, wants their employer to have similar value than they do. And employees are consumers, so they have the same value. They want to work in a business where there is ambitions, and that's again net zero ambition. That is, and again, that's a point that Gary raised today. And the other thing is, at the other end, pardon me, 3/4 of them think that they need to get new skills. So there is a recognition that to deliver net zero, there'll be a requirement for innovation. Innovation will require a new set of skills. And again, that's what Gary and Graeme alluded to today, being either in terms of technology, alternative fuels. And whereas about 3/4 of employees believe that it is their responsibilities to train. They don't see automatically as their employer responsibilities, and they don't see as automatically being part of your working hours. So there's something they should be doing themselves. So there's a keen, if you're willingness by employees to access and gain new skills. Your competitor cares because what climate leaders gain a competitive advantage, and they do that through, again, employee with better retentions. They do that again through government with lower regulation risk. They do that again with, in terms of financials by getting access to cheaper financing, higher values. But last and not least, they gain it by saving. And saving on cash and saving on carbon is one of the thing almost. So that's what you're looking at. So that's what competitors cares, and businesses cares. And the S&P Standard & Poor index is an American index, but you can see how the progress and the return on businesses that are away from the oil and gas, away from the energy, are doing a lot better. So it just gives you a directions or in the feel for what businesses do and how markets react. And fossil fuel is not the thing at the moment. Finally, government cares, and they care through, you've got various projects and systems like the emission trading schemes. You've got big plans globally to get away from coal or to get away from combustion engine to go towards electrical engine. But the big one is on carbon tax, and that's what you're seeing through, well, not directly, but indirectly, ESOS, CCR, packaging tax, that sort of thing. That's what is happening at the moment as the big companies. But again, as I've mentioned before, if government don't see the outcome coming through, they move away from the carrot of investment into the stick of taxonomy. So that's what you're saying there. So the government cares, and it cares because customers, consumers are employees and they are voters, and they all have the same value. People don't leave their value at home when they come to work. Finally, in terms of technology, in terms of projections, we've always been too conservative, both in terms of capacity, and in here you've got the example of voltaic solar, you've got the example of wind, the example of batteries, but both in terms of capacity and in terms of cost. So it is a lot more available than we thought it was going to be, and it is a lot cheaper than we thought it was going to be. So things are moving a lot faster than we thought they were going to move. So what about the cost? So there is an opportunity to actually reduce scope 1 and 2, i.e. the one you control, with net zero cost. And you've got a range of industry here showing the potentials, that goes up to 90% for consumer goods, and maybe done as low as 20% for shipping. On average, you're looking at 50% of those emissions can be reduced at zero cost. And the way this is achieved is you've got the emission which reduce, or the reduction that, or an emission that also save cost, and then that's how you free cash. And if you use that cash to create additional emission reduction, then that's where you end up with a 50%. Now, in terms of cost, you don't have to do the reinvestment straight away into those additional emission reductions, but there is an opportunity here to save cost at zero, to save cost at zero net zero cost. And if you look at the exponential roadmap initiative, for example, which is one of the way to achieve net zero and the roadmap they suggest, you'll see that the first pillar is about reducing your own emission. Reducing your own emission is scope 1 and 2, and scope 1 and 2 are what deliver those 50% we just talked about. In terms of implementation, so it has upgrading and getting to net zero may come at a slight cost, but the cost on the end price of what you actually sell across a range of industry is pretty limited, and it's limited to between 1 and 4%. It will be 1% in the electronic sectors, it will be 2% in the fashion sectors, and it can go up to 4% in the food sector, for example. So, but you can see that the impact of implementing net zero on the end price is still pretty limited. But, and that's a big but, energy pricing in the moment are just going through the roof. So the Federation of Small Businesses reckon that, electricity has risen by 3.5 times and gas by more than 4 times. So how do you do this? The question is, how can net zero help? Can help by decreasing energy usage. So if you look at net zero, what's the concept of net zero? The concept of net zero is to decrease resource usage. That's what you want to achieve. So you can do a series of initiatives, and here I've showed you an example of initiative categories and what you could implement and look at in each one of those categories and the impact they would have on net zero scope 1, 2, or 3. And I've highlighted in bold, if you want, the initiative that have got very little, if any, cost. So the first one is about monitoring your energy usage. So that's, you're thinking about, submetering, especially submetering the area where you believe you've got high level of consumptions. It's about allocating responsibilities. Again, a point I think that was raised by Graeme today about the having a green team put together. You can save using low and low cost measures, and here I've highlighted, like creating a temperature deadband. We also talked about, Gary talked about those curtains, hot air curtains. You can do regular operation and maintenance checks. You could check, again, mentioned today, check compressors and motors, everything is running properly, is running efficiently. So those are just checks and reviews and making sure you don't have any leaks and fixing those leaks if you've got any. So in terms of investing in long-term energy saving, then you can move, as we heard today, to LED bulb, but you can move as you go. You don't need to bin what's working, but when it stops working, then replace it with something which is more efficient. And there is a lot more suggestions in here, but the reason I've not highlighted them is they may come at a cost, but that's the second half of that 50%. Once you've free cash, you can then use that cash to then invest it in those other measures, or you can use the cash to balance that energy cost increase you are facing at the moment. In terms of generating your own energy, then that's what we are here for. Just use a network. We've got members that can support you in those areas. I've got knowledge and understanding of those areas, and then you can find funding and support. So I'm putting another website here that gives you access to what's out there. But as mentioned in previous webinars, it doesn't have to be only funding and support. Think about R&D tax relief, think about patent box if you can. There are other sources that you can look at. So if I focus on a few areas, there is about efficiencies. So you've got efficiency of your building, efficiency of your process, and low carbon energy. So switch to energy provider to renewable, for example. will have an impact. The challenge at the moment, it may not, it may come out of cost because it is the wrong time to switch providers. Electrification, again, in terms of, you know, energy efficient production will help. However, electricity versus gas today may not be the best move. So that's why you've got to find the balance. But a smart control system would help. Energy management, heating and air conditioning would help. So all those things are still important, you know, especially if you think about air conditioning, if you're thinking about refrigerants, if you're thinking about the risk of fugitive emissions, you know, they come at a cost, and to a cost, financial cost, and a cost to the environment. Process, that's another area you may want to look at, which is about, you know, low carbon energy productions, right? Which is about, you know, the build that renewable energy capacity, but again, is come at a cost, but it delivers a return on investment. Now, a few years ago, that return on investment was pretty poor if you were doing your own energy creation, generation, but it is changing because of energy prices and government support. Then you've got your processes, look at your equipment. So buying new equipment is probably not an option at the moment, but can you make those equipment more efficient? And then you've got transportation, both in terms of your employee, in terms of your goods, you know, and again, that's another topic that Graeme highlighted today about war vehicles. So if you need to replace it, what do you replace it with? You know, so you want to replace something which is functioning, which is delivering what you wanted. But if you do need, then keep net zero in mind. Then another topic we talked about today was engagement. And engagement, you're thinking about internal and external. So that's your employees, and they are keen, as I've mentioned about it. But you could look at your travel policy, your commuting in terms of business. Then again, you can look at, you know, how do you get your upstream, your supply, how green are they, how net zero are they, and does that net zero come at a cost? You know, is that part of your due diligence when you select who you're going to be using? And then you go your supply chain I've just mentioned, and then on the other side, on the downstream side, then you've got, that's where you've got your business, or you've got your consumer, when you've got those big organizations, you know, that's going to come to you and ask for that. So that would have an impact on all the scopes, because what they want to know is what your overall emission is, so they can develop their own carbon reduction plan based on your downstream emissions. And then there is waste. And waste, I'm sure you are looking at the moment because of prices, because waste is costly. So minimize the waste, minimize the cost. So you got the waste of material, you got circularity, you know, how you can reuse internally, but also reuse and refurbish and maintain what RWG does about those turbines. You know, that's what this is about. Instead of putting a turbine in the bin, let's have it refurbished, let's have it maintained, let's have it fully efficient. Fugitive emission is another one I've mentioned about. Now, it will have an impact on scope 1, but if you've got any risk, any air conditioning, those gases used in air conditioning have a high level of greenhouse gas warming potential, what's called GWP. And then when everything is done and you can't do anymore, then you need to think about offset, but not today, because offset come at a cost. But again, the higher your level of reduction, the lower the offset you need, and therefore the cheaper it's going to be. So what's the takeaway from today? Net zero or energy savings, and what we're saying, both because they are concurrent. Why? Because net zero is not going away and is affordable, at least affordable in the sense of getting on a journey. You are aiming at probably to be net zero by 2050 at the latest, 2045 for Scotland, ideally. So it's about getting on a journey. It's about making a move. It's about developing the roadmap. It's not about delivering net zero tomorrow. The what is about sustainability, but both environmental and financial sustainability. You need to achieve both. And for that, I would classify out to 3 E's, which is efficiency. Efficiency in terms of your facility, in terms of your process, excess in terms of waste, and once you've done everything you can, offsetting. Remember, offsetting is not a license to pollute, it needs to be the last resort. And then engagement with your consumer, with your customer, engagement with your employees and your peers, as we talked about today. So those are the opportunities, and that's where we can help. And how will you leverage net zero to deliver energy saving? They both goes hand in hand, they are concurrent, they work together. So that's the takeaway from us today. So what can we do? Then in terms of net zero support program, we can help. So you can get access to a webinar series, and we are up to 12 webinars. Today is webinar number 13, and that's the last webinar of this year. And I'll take this opportunity to wish you and your family a great festive break if I don't see you again or don't speak to you again. But in early 2023, we'll be continuing our series and likely to start that series with our friend from Agrico and Ian McLachlan. So that's the webinar series. And then if you go onto our microsite, you'll be able to find the videos, but you'll also be able to find the slides we talked about, and there is more also information. But despite being focused on a specific topic, they tend to be quite generic. So in parallel of that, we are running a one-to-one program, which is talking to businesses directly. And to date, we've had about 180 conversations over the last 18 months with businesses and trying to figure out what their needs are. And the needs vary from, as you could see here today, a full roadmap developed and ambitions highlighted and the really good work done by businesses like RWG, to businesses where they are thinking, what is net zero? Do I need net zero? What would be the cost, which is what we're talking about today. So we provide that one-to-one support. It could be intervention on site. It could be one-to-one through Teams, as we're doing today. So if you're interested, please do get in touch and you'll find the details here. So finally, I would like to thank you all for taking the time to join us, and especially the RWG for their presentations, and Graeme and Gary for their time in putting that together and sharing it with us. And probably we'll open the floor to any question you may have.
I just got one point to make, Eric. You mentioned earlier on, when you're looking about our ESOS, so we did ESOS Phase 1 2015, and straight away they could see a 20% reduction in cost to swap to LED lighting. So we used that as a business case to get CapExes approved, because, and Gary will remember this from when he was in the marine division. And it was quite easy to get these CapEx approved when you've got that data behind you to show that, all right, it's going to cost us 25,000 to fit lights to one workshop, but you'll recoup that within 18 months in savings. So if you've got the data, it certainly gives you the advantage of going to your financial departments or your board and getting approval for these spends.
Yeah, that's great. Thanks a lot for that. Yeah, I agree with that. That's why exactly the saving was showing. You free cash to bring in carbon reduction opportunities, and at zero cost in overall. There's an initial outlay, but you get it back. Any other question. Right.
Don't know if there's one coming through in chat now. I'm not sure if someone's about to type, but does anyone have any questions they'd like to ask Eric? That might be it.
So he straps on his miner's headlight.
So okay, so
I don't think there's any more questions, Eric.
Oh yeah, so I think we'll close here and give people some time back. As I said, do not hesitate to reach out. If we can help, we'll be more than happy to help. And I'm sure we can help, but anything we can do, please don't hesitate to reach out. And again, thank you for taking the time to join us this morning, and we'll let you know as soon as our next webinar is organized early in the new year. Thank you.
Thank you.